Hey everyone. Okay, we're going to get started with our webinar for today. I'm very excited to talk about this because I just think it's so important to think about your options when you're thinking about investing and understand really, what it is that you're getting into. So today we're going to talk about investing in single family homes as an investment property, and we're going to compare that to investing in syndications. So just a quick recap, here are all of the webinars, master classes that we've done so far. And my name is Suja. I'm with Lux Capital Investment Group, and my role with Lux Capital is to help people understand and get comfortable with investing in real estate syndications and just increase their knowledge around real estate in general. And then if we, and once people get comfortable with the concept of syndications, I have opportunities that will help people, give people the opportunity to invest in a syndication that they know that's been pre-vetted by me, and it's a deal that I'm investing in. I'm creating the ideal investment portfolio for myself and my family, and that way you'll know exactly the type of deals that I like to invest in, and then you have the opportunity to participate in those. So here are all of the master classes that we've done before, and definitely encourage you when you get the replay to go back and check some of those out. You can listen to them on a drive or while you're walking. You don't have to be sitting in front of a computer. So let's get started with this example. Let's say you have $50,000 and you are looking to invest it in real estate. A lot of people know that I should get into real estate. I know that that's how a lot of wealthy people hold their assets. And also, I don't want it just to be in the stock market. I want something that feels more tangible, like a hard asset. And I've just heard it's a really important way to invest. And so you've got $50,000, and we're looking at a 5-year time horizon for simplicity. And, just as a preface, when we're looking at this example, I want you to think about it as a tool for analysis. And so whenever we do an analysis, we start with a baseline scenario, which we think is a likely scenario. And then we can always tweak and run sensitivity tests. So let's say we change certain assumptions so that we can test how variable the result will be depending on how things might shift or change, because you can always make a projection and make an analysis, but a deal will almost never perform to the pro forma or the analysis. It'll usually go above or beyond, and we need to above or below, and we need to determine how sensitive is the analysis to the variety of factors. So we're going to start with the basics today. Let's look at buying a single family home. This is how a lot of people start out. It's certainly how I started out. I bought a single family home for $20,000 with a friend, and I didn't have any money at the time. I used my student loans, and I literally just wrote a check from my student loan account or whatever to, we bought it cash because we didn't have a mortgage. I didn't have any income. I was a grad student. Anyway, so I started in single family homes. Many people do. So what would this scenario look like? Let's say you have $50,000, you're going to put 20% down payment down, and then that would equal a purchase price of $250,000. In this case, let's say you do hire a property manager, so you're not having to do a lot of the day-to-day maintenance and leasing and getting tenants in there when a tenant moves out. So you save on time. And after that, the expenses, the mortgage, etc., you've got cash flow of $200 a month, which is pretty typical. I mean, of course, it could be up or more or lower or higher, but $200 is like, it's kind of an average typical amount you might expect out of a single family home rental house. Okay, so I am here to tell you, as somebody who has owned single family homes, that there are going to be expenses that are not part of your monthly cash flow, and you have to account for those. So some possible expenses in the course of 5 years owning a single family rental or a condo or whatnot, there are going to be certain expenses. For example, you might have to repair the furnace. You might have to replace a water heater or any number of appliances. I've certainly myself just replaced a dryer. I've replaced a washer. I'm going to have to replace another washer. I've got a clogged sink. There's just things that happen when you have a real estate portfolio. And, some of those things you can fix by yourself. Like, for example, my clogged sink is in my rental unit downstairs. I'm going to be able to fix that myself and that's not going to cost me money. But it is going to take my time. So just keep that in mind. But, there's certain things that I don't have time to figure out how to fix the washer or dryer. In fact, it might be kind of dangerous for me to fix a dryer. So I got a new dryer. Other potential things that might go wrong, leaky roof. I mean, I've certainly had to make roof repairs on that $20,000 house that we purchased. And then there's vacancy, right? So it's very uncommon for a tenant to stay a full 5 years anywhere. And so when a tenant leaves, number one, they stop paying rent and you have to re-rent that place. So tenants stop paying rent, but you still have to pay the mortgage. And, there's usually going to be at least a period of vacancy. I mean, let's say in a really good case scenario, you can turn over the unit in 1 to 2 weeks. And then, you got to market it and show it. And then it takes another 2 weeks. So that's probably about a month right there in lost rent. If it's a smaller, if it's a single family home property. And in addition to that, there's turnover costs. So when a tenant leaves, if they have been there for a while, usually, oftentimes there's things that do need to be attended to. Maybe the place needs to be repainted. Maybe the carpet needs to be changed out. Every situation is going to be a little bit different, but turnover costs are something that need to be factored in. So I just put together a budget, which is it's not an overly conservative budget. And it's also not an overly optimistic budget, but I've suggested $1,000 a year for CapEx and repairs. Just replacing a water heater isn't going to cost more than $1,000. Well, depending on what water heater you get, plus labor and installation, et cetera. So maybe you only have to do one major expense every 2 years. So anyways, in that case, I just put $1,000 a year for CapEx and repairs, and then $1,000 a year for vacancy and turnover. So that would be $2,000 a year and $10,000 over the course of your 5-year investment in unexpected costs. Okay, so now let's talk about cash flow. So we already said $200 a month times 12 months, that's $2,400 times 5 years is $12,000. So you could expect to get $12,000 over the course of 5 years in cash flow from rent. So that's after you pay your utilities, after you pay your property taxes and your mortgage, et cetera. And that's pretty good, right? Well, what about when you sell? Okay, so we're projecting this over a 5-year time horizon. So when you sell, we know that the property is going to appreciate. That's part of the big reason that we buy rental properties, is because we know that there is going to be some appreciation just by the nature, by knowing that real estate does tend to go up. So we're going to imagine 2% per year, which is a pretty standard. I mean, it's maybe a little bit conservative, but it's not overly optimistic, but it's also pretty standard. When I worked at banks, underwriting multifamily, we would underwrite 2% appreciation per year. So $250,000 after 5 years, that would equal about a sales price of about $275,000. Now, of course, if you're in a hot market, appreciation could be more, but then you might be paying more for that asset, then cash flow might be lower. So in like a pretty average market, a solid market, I think 2% is a reasonable assumption. It's at least a starting point. And like I said, you can always run a sensitivity test on this analysis and say, okay, well, what if the appreciation were 3% per year? What if it were 4% per year? How would that change my numbers? Okay, so let's just say it was 2%. That would equal about $275,000 at the end of 5 years in a sales price. And then that would be a net gain of $25,000, right? $275,000 minus $250,000 equals $25,000. So that's great, except that there is actually always costs associated with selling a property. In fact, those costs can, there's a range of what to expect when you're selling a house, but you got to pay the broker fee, which is 5 to 6% usually. Sometimes there's a transfer tax, depending on the kind of what you're planning on doing with the property. You might stage it, and maybe there's no tenants in there when you're selling the property, which could be 1 to 2 months of vacancy. And, you might be doing some repairs to get it ready for sale. All in all, I've just put in a number of 8% as a cost of selling the property, which actually equals $22,000, which unfortunately is just a pretty significant piece of the capital appreciation. What I've also put in capital gains as an asterisk, because you have to pay taxes on the gains unless you do a section 1031. We're not going to talk too much about that, but just put that asterisk there because it is important to note. So the total appreciation actually would only be $3,000 when you take into account the cost of selling. Okay, however, there is still some good news, because after 5 years, you have paid down some principal, and we're just going to put an estimate of $20,000 of principal that's been paid down. So now let's look at it all. So, in terms of money that you have gained, well, you've paid down your principal of $20,000 by paying your mortgage every month. Monthly cash flow totals $12,000 over 5 years, and from appreciation minus the cost of sale, that you get $3,000, and then we budgeted in $10,000 for costs over those 5 years, repairs, turnover, etc. So when you add all that up, that equals about $25,000. Not bad, right? $25,000 over the course of 5 years. That's pretty solid, right? You get $5,000 per year. 5,000 times 5 is $25,000. And $5,000 is 10% of $50,000. So you're earning a 10% return. We didn't factor in capital gains, but that's pretty small in this case. $3,000 of capital gains. So a 10% return, not bad, right? Actually, that does beat the average stock market returns. So doing pretty well. Okay, well, now let's compare that to a syndication, right? So in a syndication, we usually project those over a 5-year time period. And there's a couple different metrics that we look when we look at returns. This is a lot easier to kind of go through because we're usually looking at an equity multiple. So I'm just going to give an average equity multiple of 1.75x. So what an equity multiple means is that you take your original investment of $50,000 and then you multiply that by the equity multiple. And then that means that you put in $50,000 at the end of 5 years, you get out $87,500. So you subtract the $50,000 that you put in, and that equals a profit of $37,500. And I put this 8% cash flow in there just as a side note, because our deals typically do cash flow, but the cash flow is included in total equity multiple. So, so that's already looking better than that 25,000, right? And don't forget that you weren't having to worry about replacing an appliance or doing a roof repair or having to worry about how long your property would sit vacant, because the sponsor handles all of those things for you. There are a few risks with syndication that we talked about in some other ones, like for example, we're not going to go into them now, but in terms of the work, the main work with the syndication really is just tracking your distributions, making sure they're coming in. And then the other thing, which you have to do with the rental property anyways. And the other one is filing your taxes. So we get a K1 and those have to be added onto your taxes. And, it's just another thing to keep track of when you're doing your taxes. So let's continue this analysis. So So what this means is that your average annual return, remember we said it was 10% on the single family house. With your average annual return in this example, you take 37,500 divided by 5 years and divided by $50,000, and you get about a 15% average annual return. So that actually is a huge difference when you look at that on a what that will equal when you look at the compounding returns over, say, 10, 20, 30. Once you get to 30 years, the difference between 10% and 15% is like potentially millions of dollars, depending on how much money you started out with. So that is one thing I wanted to bring up. And then the other thing is that oftentimes in a syndication, we can do a cash out refi. And oftentimes in year 2 or 3, the syndicator will try to refinance and return capital initially. So you get to take out your initial $50,000 and start doing it again. So really getting that velocity of capital going, which is what is so exciting about investing. And once you start really wrapping your mind around that concept, velocity of capital, and getting your money to grow, then it becomes very empowering, and you can see the power of it stacking up year over year. So that is pretty much the example for today. A couple questions, to leave yourself with are: number one, should I invest in real estate compared to the stock market? Well, these two examples show you that you can't go wrong in investing in real estate compared to the stock market. Obviously the stock market is very volatile, and you never know how long it's going to be in a bull market, when it's going to start crashing. You just never know. That's why I like real estate, because it moves much more slowly. It's not a liquid asset. And so people can't make emotional decisions about selling it. They have to make decisions over time. And so that's why it's one of the reasons why it's not so volatile. Whereas the stock market, you can do it from your bed on your phone and look at the news and say, oh no, we're going to World War III is happening. I'm going to sell my stocks. And then, oh no, World War III is happening. Other people are selling their stocks. I better sell mine too. So you can't do that with real estate. So when you look at the average returns of the stock market, 10%, 15% is like a pretty solid thing when you consider the risks associated with real estate, which are, in my mind, less. Next thing to consider is how much time do you have? Even though you can hire a property manager, owning a single family residence is still something on your mind, right? Because you never know when there's going to be an unexpected expense. And do you have the time, the knowledge, the expertise to handle it? And I will say, go for it. Anyone who takes that path, that is a wonderful path. And sometimes you just have to learn these lessons for yourself. I mean, I started there for sure. And now I know how much work it is to actually own property. I still own property that I manage, but I've shifted to syndications because I realize how much more scalable it is. And it's a great way to have passive income and to leverage other people's expertise, right? I'm just, I started out being just a regular person, getting an idea to flip a house and not knowing anything, basically. I mean, now the people that I work with, they have deep expertise in their asset class, whether it's self-storage or multifamily, et cetera. They have entitlement experience, meaning they know how to get building permits at the city, and they have general contractors and they know how to run big projects, which adds a lot of value to our properties. And that's how we create so much value. Me painting the kitchen creates value, but my syndicators building 50,000 more square feet of self-storage on every property that we own is a lot more value than just me painting or changing out the cabinets or whatever it may be. So that's another question. Do you have the time, expertise, and also how quickly do you want to see your capital grow? And then the last thing is do a sensitivity analysis. You want to just get a good idea. Well, what if appreciation was 3% or 4% or 5%? What if it was 1%, right? Sometimes housing values do go down. I mean, and you might be forced to sell in a down market depending on where rents are, et cetera. So those are some basic considerations. And I'd love to close up this session, and then thank you for coming, and we'll take questions after that.